All right. Looks like we're just gonna continue from yesterday. I'm gonna go up and finish this walk cycle and then get started at some other stuff. Probably gonna do the jog and the run cycle next. Um, yeah, let's get started. Um, keys. That's not- Legacy, welcome back, bud. I'm doing well. What notification didn't it when I went live it didn't send a notification? Yeah. For this live, I'm just finishing the walk now, and then the next one, I don't know if I'm gonna, I don't know, maybe I'll do an idle or a jog or a run. Um, yeah, I'm gonna finish this one's almost done. We're pretty close to finishing this one now, so I just gotta check all the pieces are working properly. Little tiny little refinements and overlapping animation and stuff like that, but otherwise I'm pretty close to finishing this one up now. Very close. So what I want to do is just the last couple of things I wanted to do with this is um so all the little weapon pieces, I want to add some animation to the pieces on the weapon. this guy right here, which is actually pretty quick. So you can't see it yet, so everything is really stiff right now. It's not moving in the holster. So I want to add a little bit of jiggle to the bag and a little bit of jiggle to the gun and the swords and stuff like that as he's walking. Not a ton, just enough just to give it a little bit of life. You'll see. It adds just a little bit more life to everything. It like all the animation for the most part stays the same. It just gives it a little bit more weight. Yeah, I mean, idle's one way to always start animation. It's not the only way to do it. There are lots of ways to. That isn't a CapCut edit line. I'm not sure what you're referring to. It's an F curve that I'm working with right now. The edit lines, these are just control nodes. How's it going, Husar? Welcome back today, buddy. Chilling with a friend. I'm just finishing up the walk cycle, and I'll be moving on to something else after. I haven't quite figured out what I want to do afterwards, but um, Ragdoll, we're gonna be adding ragdoll. We're thinking about it. I want to animate stuff, but for the sake of time and resources, we might be exploring some ragdoll physics when the enemies die or when the character dies. My brother went to school for coding, so we didn't he didn't do coding for video games though. He did coding for back end stuff. So he was working with like POS systems, like yeah, I don't know if whenever you go to a restaurant, you know how they have tablets and they do the menu, the seating, all that stuff, and the billing. That's the stuff that my brother used to program. Yeah, it's nice to have a programmer, a competent programmer. Uh, I guess in the family as my partner for this project because I can only imagine what it would be like to have to do everything on my own would be just be insane. It would be a lot of work. Um, I'd probably still attempt it, but it's just nice to have a partner in this. No, he was laid off as well. We're in completely separate industries, but all tech jobs have just been kind of taking a bit of a hit because I guess AI. I mean, I think I don't know. Can't really speak to the economics of the business that my brother's in or the industry my brother's in. Bit much. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it gives us a chance to. Sometimes you need something like that to kind of crystallize your focus. Like I mean, his situation's I guess a little worse off than mine because mine's temporary right now. His industry has just kind of shattered. Um, the company downsized, so his was unfortunate, not temporary. Mine is a temporary thing until July, so it just seemed everything timed up nicely for us to both give this a shot, right? So we have a little bit of money saved aside. We're currently not working, so why not take a stab at it? Yeah, I'm just finishing up, like I said, I'm just finishing up these last little bits here, just to give the walk cycle a little bit more life. Yeah, we actually tried all of the different engines, or at least the popular ones. We started I started messing around with RPG, Game Maker. I think it was Game Maker, and then I was like, this is a bit rudimentary. I want something a little bit more robust. So we're like, okay, let's try Unity. And then and this is a while ago before we started kind of actually decided to make it a game. And then eventually my brother and I decided that we would try Godot. So that's when we started working together. So we messed around with Godot a little bit. And then I just, like I said, my industry is adopting a lot of Unreal. So I was like, maybe we should consider Unreal. It was something my brother was interested in as well too. I know there's everybody's got their own opinions on what engines to use, but it just turned out that I feel like it just speaks to the things that I've already done like I've already worked with node-based setups and other things with special effects. And if I do compositing work and I use Nuke, all of the nodes feel fairly the same. So it was easy for me to kind of understand the workflow. Well, Legacy, Helix, the modeling is the base. I think it's the foundational piece of understanding most 3D software. So it's whether you're going to use modeling or not, I think it's always really important to learn because it helps you learn how to navigate around the software. Because it's typically the simplest, most creative way to approach. It's not that you're modeling simple things. It's just the concepts of navigating around the softwares seem a little bit simpler when you have a focus. So learning modeling is a great way to start learning how to do software. Because I think if you want to learn how to animate and stuff like that, there's other little finicky things you also have to learn, like rigging and constraints and all that other stuff. And that can be a bit hot, like really technical for some people to kind of wrap their heads around. Whereas modeling, it just sort of it's intuitively makes sense. You move a vertex here and it creates, a shape. And I think that's simple for most people to learn. Yeah. So I ended up choosing Unreal just because it's just my industry is adapting it to. So if I can learn some Unreal stuff, then I can bring it back to work and potentially, make my position at work more valuable to production because I can do previs or I can render things in Unreal. I can even work in like live production potentially if I know Unreal, right? So yeah, Godot is pretty new. I mean, it's pretty awesome, all things considering how new it is. The community has been fantastic in supporting and updating it. The developers are amazing. I've had I got a chance to quickly chat with them, just some basic stuff because I was new to it, but um, yeah, I think Godot's fantastic. I think it's such a cool tool for people who are starting, and it's free. The 5% on the Unreal thing, is I guess sucks, but it's only after $1 million, and I don't expect my brother and I to make $1 million in our first game. So I'm pretty confident that we will skirt that 5% royalty or licensing fee for a game. Um, I mean, you never know. At the end of the day, 5% still not bad. What really hurts is the 30% Steam cost that the 30% that Steam takes, which kind of sucks because it's across the board, even for indie developers. They don't, it's not like, oh, you're a new developer, maybe we can work out some sort of deal. And if you're more successful, we kind of slowly take a little bit more as a percentage. Um, but Steam is the only game in town when it comes to selling it on a store if you want it to be successful. So you kind of have to bite the bullet and just work with whatever their constraints are. Skyscraper and a villa. You're working on a skyscraper. You should do a skyscraper tip. Is that for your Roblox little project? Oh, cool. Well, I'd love to take a look at it if you can post it somewhere. Yeah, actually, we're probably gonna do it before the game releases. We want to try our best to try to start building a community of people who are interested in the game. And then we want to do I mean, this is the kind of game that's going to need some feedback, so we're thinking we're probably going to need some um early access. On top of that, we're gonna play test and on all that stuff. So we want to try to build a community so that we can do play testing and get feedback and put it in people's hands, just the early builds of the game, just so we can make the best game we can by getting it into people's hands and having them give us feedback. Um, and then eventually putting it into early access and seeing what we can how we can further refine it through early access. What kind of server were you thinking about? Like hosting servers? Like a hosting server for the game? Oh, Discord server. That sounds like a great offer. I might consider getting somebody to help me kind of set it up and perhaps being a mod on it or something like that. I don't know. I don't know what's involved yet, so that's why I'm a little bit reluctant to say too much about it because I really don't know all the pieces that I'm going to need just yet to get a Discord community kind of up and running. But if you sound like you know what you're doing, might be able to get some help there if you're offering. We're just gonna finish up the sword in the bag, and we should be good to move on. Nothing big change. There's no more big changes left here, right? You're gonna see tons of little things that are going on. For example, like this finger. If you watch this finger, right, it's doing a little trigger pull thing. I think this hand is locked in pretty thing. Yeah, I gotta still copy some animation over from the left to the right and stuff like that. But again, I know it seems very tedious at this point, but this is kind of like the last stages of animation and animation cleanup, right? This is what effectively separates professionals from amateurs, is is making sure that you do all of your cleanup. Do I think I'm a professional amateur or animator? uh, well, I've worked a few jobs here and there. The light gray box, which you have the timeline. Yes, this is pretty much the length of, so the lighter area. You don't have to work this way. There's actually a really cool thing in Blender where, like, let's say my timeline is completely expanded out for more frames than is necessary. If you hold P, if you press P and then you kind of highlight the area that you want, you can kind of lock your time frame into that, which is really nice. So if you're working on a bigger piece of animation, you can zero down into a section instead of like having to change your play all your playback settings and whatnot. And then clear it, which is Alt P. But because I'm working in such a contained cycle, I usually just set the frame range so that it ends one frame before the cycle ends. Yes. That's the part that is tricky. It's just to get it to overlap, and you want that what they call the seaweed action. So that's that overlapping moment where it, it's the rubber pencil moment. So it should be swinging back to forth like a pendulum off his hip, right? If you think about the way a sword gets put onto your hip, you want that kind of loose pendulum kind of swinging action. It's a little difficult because what ends up happening in a cycle in an animation cycle is you start to it starts to feel very loopy. So you want to try your best to try to disguise that loopiness, which is why I'm looking for different ways just to make it different each time, right? So or just a little bit different because it's effectively taking two steps. So each of them, the way it bobbles around should feel just a little bit different, or at least the eye shouldn't be able to recognize where the loops are happening. So when you're setting up this line, oh, okay. So basically, what's happening, what I'm doing is all the animation is. I think this is what you're asking. Basically, instead of visually moving everything like this, because this can be very imprecise. I do this when I'm posing and I'm working out the poses because there's a silhouette, a gesture. There's a broadness that you want to work with. But once I'm actually animating and I want to have it all kind of contained in a certain area, I'm basically what I'm doing is manipulating the F curve. So right now, I know this is going to be on a Z rotation, right? So this movement is going to be on Z rotation. So what I do is I isolate down to the Z Euler rotation, right? And then I can actually drop a keyframe wherever I want a specific motion to move, and then I can basically just grab the keyframe now instead of actually grabbing the gizmo, because this gives me very very precise control, right? And if I want to go even more precise, I can zoom in, right? So it's even slower. I'm getting bigger hand movement, but it's going to be slower the more I zoom in. And then if I want to go super precise, I can zoom right in, hold shift, and then get like my precision can be down to like a thousandth of a decimal place. So it's basically just selecting the key, that one key. But ultimately at the end of the day, you end up doing this anyways because when you're cleaning up animation, you basically got to go through every single curve. So at least this is the way I work. Let's say I grab this curve, I'm going to frame all of these, and then I start walking through each one of these things and checking the curve to see if there's any weird jutters or anything that it's doing. Because you can, just by looking at curves, you can kind of tell what the motion is expected to do. And just by kind of doing some basic key cleanup, you can kind of clean out some of the motions and get rid of some jitters and pops and stuff like that. Sometimes you want pops. Yeah, so this sword thing is feeling a lot better now. Um, what I want to do is probably reduce it a little bit because it's a bit too much. Yeah, so basically there are all the little eyeballs over here, so I can turn on which curves I want to see. I can isolate down, or I can go here and I can, so if I have multiple selections, so let's say I want to manipulate, um, let's say the rotate Z on both of these, all I have to do is type in the Z Euler or ULER, the name of the axis control, and it will filter down for me automatically. Yeah, it can be a lot. At the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that what you're seeing in the viewport is gonna be is working, right? So the curves are there for the animator to work out details, but you don't want to get stuck just animating inside the curve. Like there are different phases of the way I approach it. I have different phases of animation, right? So it's I take care of the really, really broad strokes. I get the big key poses in first, and then I start breaking down what the thing like you saw for the cycle. I kind of work in phases. I get the legs working because I know that's the base of the body. That's where the body plants. That's where it makes contact with the ground. So that's where it needs to find stability and balance. So I work from, and it's the same thing when I used to do life drawing, right? My life drawing teacher said, well, you need to plant the character. The last thing you want to have is a character hanging on a page. So find the ground, plant the feet on the ground, and then push, build the structure upwards, right? So I approach it with the very same kind of mentality as I used to do life drawing, and that I want my characters to feel planted first. I don't know if you remember yesterday, you'll see one of the first things I do is get the feet kind of positioned, and then I kind of move the hips around that position, and then the shoulders, and then I finish off with the arms and the head, right? So um, yeah, animation is just a tedious process. I mean, for those who want quick results, animation is not the direction you want to go. In fact, most games now, especially AAA games, they're going to mocap. And then an animator like me comes in. We still have to go in and clean everything up though, right? So once we get the mocap data, everything gets translated. All the data gets piped into these kind of curves, but it's not clean. So in order to work with the mocap data, that we then have to then go and clean it up a bit. So cleanup is not something that is avoidable in animation, unfortunately. Okay, so you can see it here from this view, right? We want to make sure that the sword swings back and forth a little bit too, because if it's just planted, it just feels really stiff and boring. And because I can't guarantee um, other things, I at least want to make sure that the game is animated well. I know it can be a bit tedious to watch somebody animate some things. That's why I was always kind of curious as to whether I originally started doing um, videos, like, but there would be time lapse videos because I was never sure that people would be genuinely interested in watching somebody go through the entire process of animating. It's like it can be quite boring in some cases. I mean, I'll probably get to some more action stuff probably early starting next week with all of the combo animations and whatnot. I mean, it's not a big deal if you're like I said, it's one of those things that's like I know some people are like interested and curious about animation. They realize that this is pretty much all that it is, right? So some people are inclined, some people aren't, right? It's like Frank Zappa said, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And if you don't enjoy the process of making art, it's unlikely that you'll ever reach the end goal of producing great art. because I think once you're finished with the piece of art, it's done. Nothing else to do, right? It loses its fun. It's cool to look at momentarily, but for me, I gotta be honest, most of the stuff that I've worked on professionally, I don't even watch. It might be just a bit much. Yeah, just to add a little bit more, just one extra rotation here, just so it doesn't feel so flat. And finally, we'll add a little bit to the bag. Ooh, sorry. Yeah, I pinned it, that's why. Quaternion. Perfect. Just clear the bones. Nah, feels a bit floaty. What I need to do is I need to translate. Mhm. Just a little bit more. That's fine. Let's get messy. Well, that didn't work. Hey, Sandtime Monkey. How's it going? Great name, by the way. I'm doing great today. Just finishing up my walk cycle here for my hero character, and then I'm probably going to move on to something else. I don't know what I'm going to animate next. Thanks, Samtime. It's the hero for my game. Hoping to get him to look very survival-like type character. Hence the backpack. No, I'm having a lot of fun animating him. I'm just trying to kind of finish up this little piece right now, and then move on to the next one. I don't know. I think I'm gonna do a jog next. I'm still playing around the idea. Yeah, I want to try to basically double this up to so that he can walk with the weapons equipped. The only problem is like when you try to blend, like because he's holding weapons, they should have weight, and that weight should translate into the body when he's walking. But again, it's one of those things. It's like, okay, well, how many walk cycles do I want to do, right? Because if you think about it, if I have a two-handed weapon, now I don't have to do much on the leg side. It's what's happening in the upper body, right? So if he's walking with a two-handed weapon versus a one-handed weapon, versus no weapon. Um, so I want to try to use the walk cycle where I can, while at the same time as I don't want it to look very kind of cheap, especially like if the walk cycle is designed to walk with, a one-handed sword. You put a two-handed sword in his hand and he starts walking like this, it starts to feel weird, right? Because you almost expect him to lean the sword up against the shoulder when he walks, which is what I intend to do with it. But yeah, you can't use the same walk cycle for everything. Um, I'm gonna try to use this for as much as possible, but I'm going to be using doing an animation cycle for pretty much each weapon. Luckily, two-handed weapons for the most part. The way you're gonna hold them is gonna be more or less the same. It's the actual attack. So when you're walking around with a spear, you might hold it with one hand, but just to again, to try to maximize how much of that, how often I can use that cycle. If I can use the same cycle for all two-handed weapons, that's what I'm gonna do, or at least that's what I intend to do. And I intend to reuse as much of the animation as I possibly can. So I can just reuse parts from like the legs or parts from the arms or parts from the torso, and hopefully save myself some time animating then. So it's for me, it's more value to put in the effort to get something that works really nice early on, because if I could, then I can use that as a baseline for something else, right? So yeah, pretty much. You see why yes. Yeah, basically, so I'm actually he's doing all the AI stuff. I'm gonna be taking care of the player controller. And then he's building out all this the other stuff, inventory management, um, resource table, damage table. Like he's taking care of the bulk of the programming. But because the animation is inherently tied, the player controller is inherently tied into the animation, I figured it makes more sense for me to work the player controller. And it also allows me to contribute something on the the, the programming side as well too, because it's something I wanted to do. But walk empty, run empty. Yep, the roll. So the roll as well. So we're gonna do a dodge, but you gotta also remember it's not just the walk. Um, so consider this for a second. So I go into combat mode, right? Now a walk cycle works great if I'm squared up. If I'm squared up and I'm walking towards, right? And if I'm facing whatever walking. But the second it becomes asymmetrical, the pose becomes asymmetrical. So let's say, for example, I'm gonna go into a combat pose, and I have my shield up and my sword is at the right. So my entire pose relative to what I'm looking at is now going to be asymmetrical. So if I want to walk left, right, it's a different kind of walk. If I want to walk left and diagonally forward, that's a different kind of walk. If I want to walk forward, it's a different kind of walk. I want to walk to the right, it's a different kind of walk. Forward and right, straight back and left, straight left. Right? So all of those animations need to be accounted for. So I gotta reanimate all that. But like I said, luckily I can use the legs. I can hit the hips and the legs will stay the same. So when I'm posed out this way and I start walking to the left or to the right, right, all I have to do is get a new pose for the top of the body. So if it's a spear, right, I'm holding it out like this, a sword and a shield and a big and a great sword, right? So that all needs that is the only way to resolve that is to animate it, right? We got to animate every piece, every direction that it's going to be functionally able to move. We average it out because Unreal we can do some programming in Unreal to allow us to maximize every piece of animation and mix them and blend them together. So yeah, it's this is why making video games is crazy. It's a lot. It's just the sheer volume of art assets required is insanity, right? It's almost I would it's not fair to say. Yeah, it's just as much program. There's not gonna be just you're gonna write just as many lines of code as you're gonna write or as you're gonna produce assets. Maybe not to that extreme, but it's a good benchmark, a good kind of benchmark to hit to say, well, you got a ton of assets and they need to be done, and you need a lot of them because everything. You don't have to do it this way, right? it just depends how detailed you want your world to be because we've got prefab assets. Um, I want to make sure that the animation is something that stands out. So I want the animation to be clean. I want it to be smooth. I want it to blend nicely. I want it to be readable. I don't want there to be any question of whether or not this is a beautifully animated game. Whereas, because I don't think every other aspect of the game will measure up to that level. Certainly, so I think the programming and the animation is what I hope will stand out. So great game mechanics and then animations that sell the great game mechanics. Um, this is bothering me. It's too much. But you were right yesterday when you made your observation that the arms were just feeling a little bit too loose. So I tighten up the movement and just make sure to get that kind of that this line here so it never straightens out, right? Because when the second it goes straight, that's when it starts to feel really, really loose. So I make sure to keep a little bit of tension in the arm as he walks, just so it feels a little bit more what do you call it? Determined. But it's I think you're right. It reads a little bit better just because it feels just like a little bit more weight, like he's more in control of the weight versus just letting the weight kind of dangle there, right? So yeah, it takes a second for it all to kind of start working together, right? Like when you're just looking at legs turning, or you're just looking at the body rolling. It's not always convincing. A walk very much is a mechanic that your whole body needs to utilize. So when you're working piece by piece, it starts to feel just because of the nature of the way I work. When it's segmented, it's always going to feel incomplete until all of the pieces are kind of working together. But it was a great observation on your behalf. It was, especially because I'm staring at this piece of animation for so long. Every now and then you're looking away and doing something else, and then you come back, and then something kind of just jumps at it. You're like, hey, that seems a little bit strange now. Um, that's a good thing. And I'm glad you were able to catch that while I was streaming. So this is one of those things that's a huge benefit to me to work in front of other people, even non-professional animators or people who aren't or aren't veterans of the industry. Um, just having an eye, a fresh eye, somebody who isn't just been staring at the same thing for several hours that day, right? And getting some fresh eyes to let you know, hey, something looks a little bit awkward here. It's almost a benefit to have a non-animator look at it too, because a lot of the time my brain starts to resolve things from an animator's perspective, and that's not always the best way to do things. Because it starts to lead into like muscling through animation that just wasn't working to begin with. Okay, pretty happy with that. Cool. Okay, so move on. All right, I'm gonna take a short break and then I am going to jump back into it. The truth of is the one thing that we learned in school when you're learning to animate is that um, people instinctively know, right? When they see something that doesn't quite look right, they might not be able to verbalize it. They might not be able to tell you exactly the reason it doesn't look right, but you instinctively know when a person is walking whether or not it kind of works, right? Like there's just a sense of feeling that you um that you get from the animation. There's an intuitive and learning to trust that after you become a professional animator is difficult because what you think you know and what's actually happening and what actually needs to show up on screen are three completely separate things, right? So a lot of the time we shoot reference for animation. So I'll get up, you'll even see me right now. Like when I get up, I try to get into the pose that I kind of want to work with, just so I can get a sense of where all like in my own body, where all those things are feeling, where's the balance. And then I'll go and shoot reference, right? So I have a camera, the separate camera where I go and I actually shoot reference. And this is, I'm not gonna do it for the game only because that's a process of directing animation to the degree, to the like to the most nuanced degree possible, and that's great. Great, right? Workflow for feature animation. So when you're working at Disney or Nickelodeon or one of the big studios, um, you're gonna it's expected of you that we're gonna go shoot footage, you're gonna go use that footage, and you're gonna splice together different bits of your footage to create a piece of animation, and then you're gonna animate that, right? But in games, right, at least right now, for the purposes, if I could, I would. If I thought I could utilize it and I would get more benefit and the value of the animation would be better, or it would increase the quality of the animation, it certainly would. But the time trade-off isn't gonna be, and that, and because real-time graphics, we can capture all sorts of little nuances when we pre-render, when everything is gonna go be sent to render. But when you're gonna do it in a real-time environment, like animating when I pinch my fingers together, animating the pads squishing down, not a good use of time. Right? It's not because from a player perspective, you don't need to see stuff like that, right? You don't need to see the way the bicep bulges and having a correct bulge instead of it just inflating and stretching out. And these things are really great in feature, right? You don't immediately notice it, but you can feel it in the animation. But you're not going to feel it in in video game animation. You're not going to feel it in a real time environment. So making decisions based on what I'm going to be able to see, that's why I was kind of been a bit adamant about getting the overlaps on the swords and stuff like that, because I know you're going to see that, and that does contribute, right? Especially from this angle, you're going to see that rocking left to right kind of motion. Now I'm looking at it, I probably want to fix it just a little bit. Yeah, I think you've got a good feel for animation. You've definitely got that kind of sense for it. So yeah. Well, the next step is to actually animate. Funny, because trying to get people to I've been trying to work on projects for quite a while, but it's not easy to convince people to volunteer their time to work on projects. Like I obviously have a lot of friends who are animators in the business, and I'll tell them about my ideas, and I'm like, I got this great idea, and they think it's a great idea. I was like, hey, you want to help me work on it? Oh, I'm a little bit busy, and that is just how it goes. I think once I have something up and running, and there's already something going, and it's just a matter of them coming in to animate, it'll be easier to convince people to help me out on it. The last thing an animator wants to do after they spent their entire day animating is to animate some more, right? So, Rob Valdez, I know this name. I know this name. Mr. Robinson Aguilera. How's it going, brother? Thanks for tuning into the stream. I was wondering if anybody I actually knew in real life would show up. So how'd you find us? I didn't advertise this anywhere. I was just gonna put, I just posted it on YouTube and Twitch and stuff like that. Just like, screw it. Let's see what kind of organic growth I'm gonna get at just by posting this. Uh, and I got some people. Husar here has been incredibly supportive of my work. No, I get that. I'm also I'm a problem solver as well too. I think art never came to me naturally. At least I don't think it did. Um, I always enjoyed it, you know, and it was something that I wanted to do, but I don't think I was ever a natural at it. And it just took some time to, you know, I think it's more about less about motivation, more about habit building. Because I think motivation disappears after a while. You can only motivate yourself so long before, you know, motivation isn't enough to get you working. I think building the habit of doing it is uh, will 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 build creativity, right? But you know, I think not everybody needs to be creative. We like my younger brother isn't the most creative person, but he similar to you, he's very problem solving oriented. So he ends up this is I think it is the dream at the end of the day to I mean work with my brother on a game that like and be able to make a living on that that would be a dream come true. Thanks, Robinson. Thanks for popping by, dude. I was actually just telling them about just some of the people that I used to work with and how difficult it is to try to get people to kind of start working on things. You know, you can't blame them. You know, the last thing an animator wants to do at the end of animating in 10 hours that day is to go home, sit in front of a computer, and then start animating some more, right? So I just trying to just express how difficult it is to muster the willpower and get everybody kind of on board, even if it's just a handful of people to get on and do something. I think the only reason I was able to convince my little brother to get on board with this is because he's not employed here. He's laid off too, right? So he's like, well, I guess I'm not doing anything right now, so I might as well. Thanks, Usar. I hope so. I mean, my younger brother, we're both busting our asses off on this thing. This has become something I wouldn't say an obsession, but um we feel we're pretty serious about it at this point. Oh, nice, dude. You're still over at Paw. Yeah, I'm off until I mean they keep extending me. Well, maybe they keep extending. They extended me once. My original return date was in the beginning of May, and then now they've extended to July. But I'm told there's a bunch of work that there should be about 18 months worth of work. Um, so good news and bad news, I guess. You know, hopefully in that 18 months I can get the project up and running and into early access. And then hopefully it does enough that I don't think I'm gonna be able to quit my job if I'm being completely honest, but hopefully I can start supplementing my income with a secondary stream here with games and then eventually take the plunge and go full time. But yeah, it's tough business right now. I'll take what I can get in terms of the animation work. Are they why how come you're doing so many hours on par right now? Are they are they behind schedule? Jonas McGee. Oh, he jumped into my Twitch and then disappeared. Maybe he's still there. Anyways, if you do come back, I am making the main character for my video game, or what I intend to be the main character for my video game. And today we're just working on walk cycle, animating a walk cycle for him. And it's getting pretty close to finished. I'm just kind of tumbling around it just to see if I can find any else things I want to fix. What I'm buttoning on right now is, or at least what my brain is buttoning on right now, is the stuff that's attached to his bag. The problem is if I animate it once, I gotta animate it in everything. So I'm there's a part of me that's like, don't bother, because you're gonna have to do this on every time you do any piece of now you're gonna have to animate one, two, three, four pieces, additional pieces of overlap animation, and I've already done it for the belt buckle, so I don't know. Jonas, thanks for the follow, bud. I appreciate it. Jonas, I appreciate that, buddy. Yeah, definitely. Animation is one of those things that just takes freaking forever to do. And it requires a little bit of patience. And sometimes, you're going to have some detractors because you're spending an absurd amount of time on something. But, it's one of those things I wish I could communicate why it's important to me. I don't know. I don't have the verbal vocabulary or a complicated enough vocabulary to tell you why this is important to me, but it is, right? So. Yeah, there's definitely work on the horizon. Hopefully, I don't know. This is what they tell me. But they might be just saying this to me so I don't go look for another job and quit on them. I don't know. And I don't blame, I mean, just as well as I do, the business is the business right now. And I don't blame the studio that I'm currently working for having to lay people off just because, I've been there for 5 years and is it 5 years now? I think it's 5 years. 2026. No, 4 years. And they've been good to me for the most part. I think it's been 5 years. I can't remember. They've been good to me. So they've never really given me cause to be upset with them, and I don't see them doing malicious things. I just think the business of animation in Canada just sucks right now. Unless you own the property, unless you own the intellectual property, you're kind of screwed right now because our service work isn't cheap anymore. It's not cheap for Americans to send their work to Canada anymore. So no, I get what you're saying, Jonas. Uh, yeah, you know, uh, it's tough to explain to people the intrinsic satisfaction of making art. Because there's also people that make a lot of money making art. So there's this social perception that you're not a great artist if you're not making money on it, right? So I mean, long gone are the days of Pablo Picasso's and Frida Kahlo's and people who can just be like, I'm just gonna paint for a living and I'm gonna sell this one painting and live the next 5 years on it, right? Like that doesn't really exist anymore. At least I don't think so. I don't know anybody that works that way. Um, yeah, I mean, if you don't have passion for it, I think the business of working in animation, I think um weeds out the people who don't have the passion for it. Okay. Dude, I loved Treasure Planet and Atlantis. Both movies are fantastic. Treasure Planet is probably one of the most underrated Disney animated films. Um, that and then Emperor's New Groove. That is, I think, one of my favorite Disney movies that didn't get that big release, but I think it is so wildly funny. Treasure Planet? I think Treasure Planet was Disney, wasn't it? I'm almost certain Treasure Planet was Disney. Yeah. Well, at least Disney owns it now. I'm pretty sure it was done by Disney, though. Yeah, it's a Walt Disney presentation. I can't remember all the things. I just remember the beautiful animation. I actually haven't watched it in a while. I just remember it was among my classmates and my cohorts. We were all like, "Why didn't this movie get more promotion? Why didn't anybody sell this movie harder? Where was the marketing team? Because it's a beautifully animated movie. Um, yeah, I don't know. It turned out to be one of my more favorite Disney features during that era of Disney. Astartes. No, I haven't seen Astartes yet. Is that the? Let me take a look. Oh, it's a mini series. Dude, I'm in. Looks dope. Oh, that's cool, man. Yeah, no, I didn't even know about this thing. I guess this is you're saying he did this in Blender? Yeah, I've become a bit of a pretty big fan of Warhammer stuff these days. It's pretty awesome now. I can't wait for whatever Henry Cavill's gonna do with the Warhammer series. I thought he was, yeah, I felt like there's probably some Maya in there. It looked like it didn't look like it was rendered in, looked like it might have been rendered in V-Ray. It has that V-Ray quality to it. I will definitely try, maybe do that someday. That's a great idea, actually. I was thinking I might potentially do some React stuff, but I'm super worried about DMCA's and copyright infringing. I don't even pull up the references that I'm using. So yeah, I do have any offers I see. Robinson, thanks for popping by, dude. I really appreciate that, man. I'm glad that you're able to even just kind of browse through and find it on your page. I guess you're subs to to the channel, so I appreciate it, man. Thanks for stopping by. No music or dialogue. Ah. Yeah, I will. I'm definitely gonna check all that stuff out. I don't want to get too distracted from what I got to get done today. But that dude, that just from what I'm looking at, just at a glance, it looks badass, and I can't wait for them to start. I can't wait for Warhammer to start doing more stuff. That was a huge. I guess it was um, Space Marine 2. I played Space Marine 2. That was freaking awesome. Okay, let's go. Yeah, 8K. Rendering at 8K must be an absolute nightmare. I can appreciate any studio that wants to do it for us. I'm not gonna stop them, but I don't think I would ever do it personally. It's just the diminished return on top of the fact that nobody else can be like, well, it's 8K, because I don't think anybody can tell the difference between 4K and 8K. Oh, is that true? Is that right? I didn't know that. Yeah, I gotta dude, there's so much stuff I haven't been watching only because I've been busy with other, like, just making. I was working on a short, working on games, working on it, working in the studios, and yeah, I haven't had a time just to sit down and just binge watch some television. But you're saying Secret Level is based on. All right, dude. I'm gonna start. I'm gonna make a note of all this stuff because you You're blowing my mind here. Secret level Warhammer. Start. Buddy, that's on my watch list. And that's gonna happen tonight. Okay, there's no point in me just sitting here. Let's move on. That's dope. I can't. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the Warhammer universe. My buddy Will, he's crazy about this stuff. But I'm definitely gonna share that with him. He probably already knows. Um, Story by Taya. Cool. Thanks, dude. I'm gonna check that out. It gets promoted. I have been watching some lore videos on Warhammer, and wow, it is insane how like the Warhammer world kind of first gets started. I don't know all the little specifics, but I know like the Terran race and how they have like an basically like an all father, like an Odin type character who's like the all father. And I was reading about the different sons he had and how they became like different I guess factions or something like that of humans. um, it's such a cool universe, and I wish I had gone into it when I was younger. Um, I'm sure there's room for it, but high school I was mainly consuming anime. Yeah, it's pretty much anime all through high school, unfortunately for all the Western media. And I started kind of getting into more Warhammer and stuff like that, probably in the last decade or so. So we want a new one now. Save this. Yeah, there's a lot of lore in the Warhammer universe. Like, when you look at like Tolkien's work and stuff like that, you don't think there's initially that much, and then you get people who are experts in the thing, and you're just like, well, I don't realize he wrote this much. And then when you have multiple authors now contributing to that world, the Warhammer world, and there's so many books, there's so much new media out on it, it's gonna be difficult to get caught up. It's kind of like One Piece, right? You could start now, but it might take you a while to get caught up. So I don't know how many episodes is One Piece at now. 1,600? Is it 1,600 yet? 1,500? I don't know. The last I saw it was around 1,200 episodes. Maybe it's at 13, 14, 1,400. I don't know. The last time I checked in, I think it was at 1,300 episodes. Oh, I'm sure it is, dude. I don't question the how deep the lore for the Warhammer universes. I mean, people take this stuff seriously, dude. And I'm not one to mess with them. Partly why I'm kind of glad. Like I was glad with what Henry Cavill was gonna do, or at least what I was happy with what Henry wanted to do with The Witcher, and what they actually ended up doing with it. Not a huge fan of it. Um, so I hope Henry Cavill kind of sticks to his guns with Warhammer and tells the story that the universe that is in the universe. Not only just because it's great for the fans to get to see the world that they know and they experienced growing up and throughout their lives and see it realized on screen. Uh, I think it's almost offensive when they decide to put things into it that weren't originally there. Like it's fine once the series has evolved a little bit beyond the base lore, and then you want to try something new. But when it's your first attempt, stick to the books, stick to the original story. Yeah, exactly. Let them cook. Okay, I'm gonna do the idol. The Necrons. In the Warhammer in the 40K universe, I have been a fan of I've always now I don't know too much about the lore and all that stuff, but visually I've always enjoyed the way the aesthetic of the orc, and the way they reimagined orc for greenskins, I should say, I guess, for the Warhammer universe. I just like how steampunk they are, and how they one of my favorite kind of styles of that is that kind of steampunk universe, and how they kind of like I don't know if it's steampunk per se, um, but industrial punk, I guess maybe is the more correct or correct term. But I just love the way they build mechanics, very chunky and kind of hacked together, and it looks like they don't really know what they're doing, but they're still reasonably competent at it. Yeah, that sounds awesome. Orcs' origins basically are devolved bioweapon from their war in heaven. Like, if that's not a synopsis of that makes me want to read more. I don't know what else could get me to get be more interested because that sounds awesome. According to Tolkien, elves are orcs in the Tolkien universe are basically just elves, or like quote unquote fallen elves. I don't know exactly. I think they ate something that they weren't supposed to eat or something like that, and but they effectively used to be elves. And I always thought that was a pretty cool way to kind of create a secondary or even an antagonist race, right? It's kind of like uh the chrysalids, where you have the Eloi, the Morlocks and the Eloi. They're of the same people, but they just evolved differently. Yeah, yeah, you got it. Corrupted by Morgoth. Yes, I know that part. I don't dig too deep into it, but I do know that part that they were once elves. I like stories like that. Um, one story I like when you create a story where it's not immediately obvious that they're kind of that they're enemies. What, for example, um, not a huge fan of the show. I don't know if you guys ever watched Smallville. Not a huge fan of the show, but what I did like is that they made Lex Luthor and Clark Kent like kind of like early young friends. And then, so it just makes the tension in the relationship and the fact that Superman and Lex Luthor become mortal enemies um, that much more impactful. I always enjoy stories where it feels like, a falling out of a friendship and there's a real, a raw quality to it that could actually happen between two people who were once best friends and they become bitter rivals, right? Sick, dude. I'm definitely saving all of your links right now to check out after I'm done working today. That looks, I've been at it for 2.5 hours without a break. I'm gonna take a short break. I'll be right back, guys. Story of killing a god who made gravity they didn't know he was killing. It just tore a hole in reality and ate their souls. Yeah, Rob was a friend of mine, a good friend of mine from. I hired him. I was the animation director at a studio called Sinking Ship for about six or 7 years, and I hired him. He's a super talented animator. Um, yeah, he's a good buddy of mine from the business. He's a really talented animator. He's currently working on Paw Patrol. Yeah, it's pretty cool to have some friends stop by and say hi. Been like I was mentioning before, it's been rough in Toronto or in Canada for animation, and both of us at some point have experienced layoffs and work, and I'm glad he's working. He's a super talented guy, really nice guy. But yeah, there's some children's television shows. I think what Canada is actually pretty popular for is doing children's television shows. So a lot of the stuff that I used to watch as a kid was produced at a studio called Nelvana. Nelvana did a ton of stuff for kids television show back in the day. Like trying to think of ones off the top of my head. My Pet Monster. 'Cause if you guys are, I guess in your 40s or late 30s, early 40s, you'd remember like My Pet Monster or other ones. Late 80s, early 90s, the Care Bears. They were the studio that did the Care Bears as well. So I spent my early career when I first started working in children's television, um, and continued children's television up until about, I don't know, 2017, 2018, around there. And that's when I transitioned. I mean, I started off in film. So my first project I ever worked on was Chronicles of Narnia, the movie, from I think 2000, it's around 2006 or 2007. Um, yeah, I remember the first shot that I got to was basically a bird. And he like basically it's not much bigger than my cursor. He just flies across the screen right there. I remember spending like a week and a half on it. Yeah, I'm probably gonna add some breathing, very subtly. You don't want to be too much because then it starts to feel a little bit loopy. So he's constantly like that. One thing that kind of stands up to me in video games where they animate that heavy breathing, and it just kind of sits there and like almost pulsates, and I just find that a little bit awkward. But there's going to be actually two idle cycles. So this is when he's out of combat. So this is like when you're kind of exploring around the world and you stop moving. This is kind of like the idle pose it's going to take on. And then there's the combat idle, right? So when you're in combat and you're not actually doing anything, you want him to be in a different pose, kind of ready for combat. So this is your, I guess, your exploration idle. I don't know. But yes, I'm definitely going to add some breathing to it subtly. Let's see if I can add some of that right now. Let's see. I put that on rotate X. a little bit quicker. Yeah, it's just I think the in breath is slower and the out is a little bit quicker because you're gonna pause at the yeah. There's a pause at when you completely inhaled before you exhale. And the exhale should be a little bit sharper than the timing on the Um, so the way the cycles work, yeah, I mean, there's ways to do it so you can work modularly, so you can contain all of your breathing in one action and then layer on top, layer additional actions on top of it with the non-linear animation editor in Blender. The way I like to do it is basically so I get a loop working, right? So you can see everything is, I just kind of work in a way that I know my first and my last keyframes have to be exactly the same, and then everything else happening in between doesn't really matter, but as long as it connects on each end. So that is considered one contained loop. So if I wanted to breathe a bunch of times within the loop, I can either take the animation and just loop it again and just paste it against the last frame, or I can scale it, and I can have them, like, if I wanted to breathe a lot faster or something like that, I can scale down the animation. But basically, you're just setting a limit to what your beginning frame is and what your end frame is, and your beginning and end frame have to match. Everything in between is whatever, right? It's because it'll cycle back as long as the same and begins and ends on the same frames and the same pose. Everything loops underneath it. So if I want to add additional breathing, it will extend the cycle, but it's not like I have to then cut and paste all of the keyframes and keep extending the cycle. So Blender basically knows you've set it to a cycle and it will continue to run on a cycle for as long as the timeline is running. In this instance, though, I don't have to do that because I've set my timeline to the beginning and end frame, what the keys are going to look like, and I've locked in the keys on frame 1 and frame 151 so that when the whole thing starts over again, it should just naturally loop. Yeah, if you wanted to breathe 1,000 times in a in a specific frame, you can basically cycle it out and bake it down, so you don't actually have to cut and paste anything. So you'll see if I grab. So right now, the way all this ends, if you look at the keyframes here on the F curve, let's just take this one for example. Right? So I know this is cycling, so we can add basically a modifier to it and just tell it to cycle, and you see how everything updates. So basically, prior to that, it's just happening in this little selected area. But if I run the cycle on it, it basically runs it for infinity. And then I say, okay, I want it to run to frame 1200. So I set my frame range to 1200, right? And then I bake it all down there, and then I can continue animating other things afterwards, and I can move that around and slide it around, or you can just contain it into a single action and then blend it later with the nonlinear animation editor. Um, yeah, it's basically how cycle work effectively works. Uh, let's just get, yeah. In one move cycle, you have one step and one hands. Yes, if let's say you want the cycle to have one step, but you want 100 arm movements within like within that same time range, you would basically have to cut and paste and then slide your key and scale the keys down to fit that time range. Yeah, I mean, it's again, there's several methods for squeezing in additional cycles and stuff like that. A, a lot of ways to skin the cat on this one. But typically, yes, the way you described it, if I want to contain the cycle, I will cut and paste the animation so that, let's say I want the arm movements to happen 5 times, but the leg movements to happen only once. I can do that, but I just have to manually kind of cut and paste and scale those keys down. Yes, you'd have to squeeze it. Basically, you would take this and you would say, okay, I want to take this frame here, and you would just, oops, you would scale it down like that, and then you would slot it in somewhere like over here if you wanted it over there or something like that. It's not the best way to work, but it can be done that way for sure, for sure. So I come from like a traditional animation background, so I started off on pencil and paper. So doing the grunt work isn't a huge stretch for me. I just, when it comes to making art, my default position is just to take the long road. Shortcutting ends up just hurting the artist in the long run because you're ultimately gonna have to go through the process. There's no two ways about it. Um, so if you're committed to the process, then you might as well just do it the right way. You can take shortcuts later, but I think when you're learning something, the best thing to do is to take the long route, especially when it comes to kind of artistic endeavor. Because art is definitely one of those journeys where you pick up a lot of stuff along the way. And yeah, so in terms of like doing cycle animation, yeah, there's a million ways to do it, but that is probably the way I would approach it if I wanted to squeeze more timing into the animation, or I would just animate it by hand, right? So so you'll probably see me do something along those lines right now, just because I like doing head movements in idle, a little sharper kind of like head dart movements, and I like to build that into the idols. But in order for it to not feel loopy, I'm gonna need to extend the cycle. So basically what I'll do is I'll just double the cycle out and then add in little additional moments throughout within the idle cycle. So I get a full, basically right now it's at 150. So at 30 frames per second, I get what, uh, 5 seconds of animation. So I can extend it by up to 300 frames, which will give me 10 seconds of idle. I can do additional stuff inside there too. Sometimes I do that with the walk cycle too, just to make it feel different. So a single walk cycle for me, for most time, the definition by definition, it's going to be, you know, front, left foot, right foot, right, left foot, right foot, and then the cycle ends when the left foot plants again. Instead, so what I'll do is I'll actually double it out. So it all runs at the same time, but then I can add little extra things inside there just to make it break it up so it doesn't feel like a cycle. Thanks, man. Slowly getting there. Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. It's a bit too. It's a bit washy, too floaty. At the same time, I'm trying to get the. I'm trying to get it to work without any weapons equipped as well. That's why I keep turning the armed weapons on and off, just so I can see what it looks like when he has no weapons. So it looks okay. This arm feels a bit stiff when there's no weapons on it right now, which makes sense when there's a shield attached to it, but it looks a little bit awkward when there's nothing attached to it. Yeah, I think I get what you're saying. Yeah, I plan on doubling out this cycle just because 5 seconds is a bit slow to capture like little nuance movements without it making it feel like it's really loopy. But yeah, maybe that's the rotation up. It's just a bit too floaty right there. All right, 6:30. I think I'm pretty much ready to call it a day. Productive though. Finished up the walk cycle for the most part. Probably need to tweak it just a little bit, but I think I'm satisfied with where it's at. This guy will carry into tomorrow. Yeah, I'm gonna double it out and add some head movement to it. I'm just realizing this texture got screwed up. Did it? Or is that just lighting? I think it's just lighting. Yeah, I'm trying to be a little bit more chatty. I figure, particularly when people start showing up, if there's a few people, otherwise it's just dead air. But you know, some people don't mind, but that's okay. It's getting there. Okay. We're gonna call it a day. Thanks for popping by again, Usar. Am I saying that right? Husar? Husar GG? No, what is Husar? It's Polish. Oh, that's cool. The Winged Hussar, Husaria, were an elite heavy cavalry formation of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth operating from the early 1500s to 1776. They're best known for their dramatic feathered wings and devastating battlefield charges that broke almost any enemy. That is cool. I love history stuff like this, man. That is such a cool design. I don't know how practical it is for warfare. I guess it just looks intimidating, but it is a really, really cool design. Feathers on their backs like that. Was like, I guess they were trying to like mimic the shape of like angels riding down on horses. That's really cool. Yeah, that's really cool. Anyways, dude, thanks again for popping by. It was a great stream today. Got some work done. Bit of a chatty one, but it was a good one, dude. Oh, I bet those feathers, the way they would ride in, the way they looked, would scare the crap out of other horses. They would terrify the crap out of other humans, I imagine. So cool, dude. Anyways, man, have a great evening. Thanks for tuning in. Talk to you again soon. Cheers, bud.